Hey Darren, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Dan. Having a good day.
Good.
Yourself?
Yeah, good, good. Let's dive into it. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about what you're doing in terms of qualifying buyers, especially when you've got a high degree of confidential concern for one of your clients. Also, just being aware that the AML legislation has just kicked in, and so I'd just love to hear how the approach that you take around how you qualify buyers. Is there anything, tell me about your experiences, and is there anything that you would have been doing differently? What's the general steps that you go through?
Yeah, so I guess when qualifying buyers, I get an inquiry come through. That they've typically found the business that's for sale. That'll come through into our system, and I'll look to make contact with that buyer um, in the first instance. And I guess when I think about it, what am I actually qualifying? You know, Really, it's their intent. Do they genuinely want to buy, or are they just curious? That would be
Mm,
one of the first kind of real things here. I think from there, it's moving into kind of capacity. So, can they fund it? Can they run it? Are they aligned with it? In terms of fit, are they the right buyer for this particular business? So, again, depending on some of the different businesses that I've sold before, it would take a particular type of buyer. Whereas there's other businesses where it could be a number of buyers from different backgrounds with different skill sets.
mhm.
Um, I guess then you move into kind of understanding, and do they actually understand what it is that they're looking at here? Are they fully developed in their own strategy as to their why and their what? Um, and really, the next part then is moving into time frame and their readiness to transact in
Yeah.
the time frame that's required. Um, I think a buyer can be genuine, but
So
still not ready.
talking about those steps, what are the red flags for you? Give me an example of a red flag.
Oh, okay. So I think red flags, often there'll be a number of things that come out. And one of those would be very vague on funding. That's a key one for me. Um, I think to move back a stage is often where, depending on who the person is, even the type of email that I receive the inquiry on. If it's a generic Gmail one, that can be a red flag because they're trying to hide from where they're coming from, or potentially it's not a red flag because that's just they're doing it from a personal capacity. But that sometimes brings things up for me. Um, as part of that kind of qualifying process and the red flags, I would look that person up on LinkedIn straight away,
Mhm.
because by doing that, I can then see, are they someone within the industry already? If they've then provided me with a generic email address, are they trying to hide something? So that is something that comes up for me. Um, I think the other one would be, do they share much or not? Are they very guarded with their own information? That's typically another red flag. Um, what else would there be?
Let's actually just do a little role play because I'd like to just see how I'll sort of be maybe one of the more difficult sides of how buyers potentially could be, or maybe just a bit reluctant or whatever. But yeah, let's give that a crack.
Okay.
I'll be I don't know, Steve the Steve the buyer.
Steve the buyer. Okay. Hi, is that Steve?
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
Straight on my phone.
yes, it is.
Oh, hi, Steve. This is Darren calling from Vision Brokers and Advisors. I'm just giving you a call into the relation to the inquiry you made on the fabrication steel business we have in Sydney.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. No worries. No, thanks for the call. Yeah. Could you send the information through?
I can definitely send the information through to you. Before we do that, just to follow the correct process and protocol here, I'd love to run through some high level questions with you, just to understand a bit about your background, your interest in the business, your motivation, um, and probably financial capacity as well to transact on this business. Is that something you have time for to discuss with me now?
Sure. Yeah. That's okay. Let's. Yeah. Sure.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. Steve, I guess where do we start? Really, your background. I'd love to hear a bit about yourself, your journey, and then we could probably move into why this business.
Oh well. Look. I mean. Look. I'm just. I'm just looking for a business. I'm not in that industry. I just saw the size of the profit, and I'm just looking for a business to buy.
Fantastic. And when you say you're just looking for a business to buy, have you considered the type of industry that you want to go in at this point, or is that still something?
No, I just want to find something that has a certain amount of profit and that, that I can probably put, just run passively or, put a manager in.
Okay. Um, Fantastic. I really appreciate your honesty there. I think with this type of business, because of its nuance, because of how specialized it is, um, it could be that under the right management team, it could work. But I do think we'd want to just establish a few more things in terms of the background, maybe the skill sets and what you'd be looking to bring to that business. Is that something we could dive into a bit deeper?
Yeah, that's mate, Darren. That's great, mate. Because I think like when as soon as you start to have a buyer that just starts to go off course or is not giving you much to work with, that's the point where you've really got to pull them up and actually say, actually, no, we've got to pass this hurdle here because
Mm.
otherwise this conversation's about to end. You've done it in such a nice, polite way. What do you say when like maybe can we fast forward to like role playing the funding question?
Yeah, okay.
So when uh, yeah, let's fast forward to there because I'd be curious just to just see how you deal with that.
Fantastic. Okay. Steve, yes, just I really appreciate everything you've shared so far. I think where we get to now is looking at kind of the funding of the transaction and your financial capacity. The business we have listed is an asking price of 3.5 million. So I'd love for you just to give me a bit of background as to where you are in that process, whether you're working with a particular brokerage firm, how the funding might be structured for this particular business.
I'm not working with a brokerage firm. I just I just look to definitely get some funding and yeah, I'd be borrowing to purchase.
Fantastic. And when you say borrowing to fund it, have you considered the type of funding or the amount of funding that typical lenders would look to supply versus bringing equity or cash to the table as part of that transaction?
No, not really. I mean, I'm when we get to that point, I'll put an application in and yeah, I should be able to fund it.
Appreciate that, Steve. I think for this type of business and the value that we're looking at, I would highly recommend probably engaging that broker sooner rather than later to really establish where the land lies for you and in terms of being able to actually fund this business. Um, and therefore looking at what mechanisms you might need to put into place to be in that position to move quickly. We are expecting a lot of interest in this business, and therefore I would hate for you to miss out by then having to go down the path of starting that process. So I'd highly recommend if we probably pause the conversation here, have those discussions with a broker, and then we can probably dive a bit deeper into what the nuances are of that and whether that's something that's likely to work with this particular vendor and the structure of this sale.
Yeah, mate. Darren, that's just spot on again. Like, it's such a common thing. I mean, and that, I think that's what buyers they tend to do is they look for businesses first. They think the first step is finding the business. The first step is actually getting ready on their side
Mm.
because we can't introduce opportunities to them. Like until they can actually satisfy those questions and we can take them to the client, they're not going to get any information and they're not going to progress. And I really like the way that you just put up one very, very delicately. You just put up that one, but you sort of, well, I wouldn't say it was that delicate. Well, you're probably a little bit firm as well, which you have to be.
Mm.
But you just put up that barrier in that wall, which is that sets that standard to say, actually, no, you're not ticking these boxes. That's fantastic. What do you're in a transaction at the moment actually where you've got a client and disclosure of information is really sensitive. It's a real critical issue. It's in an industry where I don't know how many inquiries you've had. I think it's over 100 inquiries now that you've had on that business.
Yeah.
How are you actually then what are then the steps that you're taking to then get a qualified buyer information? Like how are you qualifying them after they've satisfied those boxes and then getting them the information?
Well, I think with this particular client, I'd like to take you on a bit of a journey and just explain that in a bit more detail. So when I took on this client, what I agreed with them, because of the sensitivity, because of the risk, every potential buyer would go through them for approval before any further disclosure.
Mhm.
Um, and I think at first I felt that was the right strategy to take. On reflection, probably not. Because what I was finding was, even though I had qualified someone and they weren't within the industry, I've done as many background checks as I could, things I've discussed before in terms of trying to research the person, look them up professionally. Um, I believe they didn't represent any commercial risk to the business, and yet my vendor, for any particular reason, may have felt they weren't, and therefore they weren't getting the extra information, and I wasn't
Mm.
able to progress the deal with momentum and bring buyers to the table to create that competitive buyer pool. So after about 3 or 4 months of going through this process, it was quite slow. What we decided was to have a conversation with the vendor, um, and explicitly ask them to give me a little bit more bandwidth here, where I could use my discretion to
Yeah.
say, right, I've seen this person, I've looked into them, I've done as much research as physically possible. There is limited to no commercial risk. Therefore, I can progress them forward. And
Yeah.
by that point, then it really helped to create the momentum in that deal. So
So,
you're
so
right,
basically, if the buyer wasn't in the industry, you had discretion to disclose.
100%.
Yeah.
If again, and again, there's a nuance with that because with this particular one, I was getting buyers from within the industry, and again, some would hide where they were emailing from in terms of doing it from their business, and others wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so that gave me a clear distinction between which one's actually looking to acquire for strategic purposes and which one is tire kicking
Yeah.
and trying to find out some extra information. So it became actually quite obvious in the end on those measures. There's a few that fall outside of that, and it's with the best endeavours here to really screen them to that high level of degree because of the sensitivity. But once I've gone down that path, it was actually so much more efficient from my end, so much more efficient for the vendor and for the transaction itself to come to a successful conclusion.
Roughly out of like 100 or so inquiries, how many ended up getting the IM?
Just to put it in a broad bucket, I'm going to say about a third.
Yeah.
But if I looked at a graph of the 100 versus the IMs, it would be an interesting graph to see because a lot more at the back end than at that front portion
Yeah.
because of the limitations there were in terms of progressing some of those buyers.
Yeah. So that's basically 100 times you went to the client with, you know, a host of information about every single individual buyer, quite a lot of no's from the client,
Quite a lot of no's,
probably
and
understandably to some extent.
yeah, no, absolutely. They can absolutely have a sense too. It's their business. They're in the industry. They probably got a good feel for some of this too. So
Mm.
there's definitely, for me, I like to take that on board with the clients. And if there are ones that I do feel, I really genuinely feel this is someone to push forward, we'll have that dialogue and conversation. Whereas I'll admit there was a couple within that one where I actually left it to the vendor. I was
Mm.
like, if you don't feel this is one to progress, I'm going to trust your judgment and your gut instinct on this one.
Mm.
Um, so I guess with that, there is looking at it from that holistic point is what I feel is absolutely going to work. Taking the vendor's feedback on as well, and coming out hopefully somewhere in the sweet spot. The one thing I would add on reflection to this one was probably the length and depth I went to in qualifying these buyers and the amount of information I provided the vendor.
Mhm.
Um, Going forward, I think my learning there was it doesn't have to be as detailed as what I was providing because I was spending quite a lot of time documenting all of the various process steps I've gone through, but in terms of the why, the what, the how, the fit, etc., and providing a real robust document, if you like, on every single one,
Mm.
which halfway through I felt this isn't working. And
Mm.
probably to the point as well, not having the bandwidth to progress those that didn't need that, it slowed the whole process down.
Yeah.
So that was a very good learning for me that potentially on those with commercial risk, yeah, they probably do need that level of depth. Those outside of it don't.
You mentioned something there, slowing the process down, which I think is really interesting because momentum is so important to be able to manufacture as part of the process because you have to have multiple buyers looking at the business at the same time. And, as you know very well, and anything that can slow that or hinder that happening actually really makes actually getting to the offer stage really hard. I'm really pleased you're at the offer stage now, and it sounds like there's a few offers on the table, which is great. And I suppose we'll stay tuned to see what happens over the next course of the next couple of weeks there. But no, thank you, mate, for sharing that. That's I think it's just a great standard. I think it demonstrates the level of effort, as well as the way that you're able to just tailor to clients and various clients' needs. I think that's a big part of what we're about, what VBA is about, and I think that's great. The anti-money laundering is a really interesting thing as well, and basically, as you know from today, I actually think it's a really positive thing because it means that, 99.9% of buyers that we speak to are legitimate buyers. They're not trying to launder money. But the new laws require us now to ask a set of questions that effectively does qualify buyers, probably to the extent that you have been qualifying them for this client. And, the days are gone where you can just spray out IMs to buyers once they've signed an NDA without asking anything about them. And I think that's really, ultimately, is a really good thing for the industry and for the clients. But the whole industry is up in arms about it. I don't think it's great for real estate agents because nothing about their clients is confidential. Everything's listed in open market. But for the business broking industry, I think it's a really positive thing for clients and for brokers who adopt it as a key part of their standard operating process, which every brokerage will be doing from today.
Yeah.
But again, the whole industry is really frustrated about it because it does increase the administrative burden. And I think the way that we'll approach it is we'll just simply ask the questions that we've continued to ask, except we'll just add in, questions such as, okay, we need to know, this is now the law, where did you get that money from? If later down the track we are required to, are you able to provide evidence of that? That's really all we need to add into the mix at the moment. And then if they do progress and if things move towards an offer or if things move towards a term sheet or whatever, we probably will have to request evidence of where the money's come from. And I think there'll be probably a little bit of a period where buyers, sort of are like, why are you asking me these questions? But like anything, everyone will get used to it over a few months and it'll be fine. But I actually think it's a really good thing for the industry.
Oh, I agree with you. I think it's fantastic in terms of just helping that transparency. It'll probably also help take down a couple of barriers there in terms of those conversations because it's now required by law that we go a bit deeper into that than just, I've got funds. That's the end of the story. So yes, look, to start with, it's going to have its teething problems, I'm sure. It might put a few noses out of joint, I think is the old saying. But to your point, within 6 months from now, those legitimate 99% of buyers would have been through the process so many times that it'll just become par for the course and they'll reel off that information freely. So
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I'd add, just on that, I think, with business broking and real estate or residential sales, commercial sales, all falling under the Real Estate Act, I think this is one thing where, yes, it's actually going to benefit the business broking section.
For a change, yeah.
Yeah, for a change, exactly, rather than us be on the other side of that. So hopefully that continues.
Yeah, that's right, mate. Thank you very much for just sharing everything you have today, and well done on what you've achieved with that particular client, and just how you've been able to manage that process, and really also just set a standard for qualifying buyers that probably already meets and exceeds the standard of legislation that's only just come into effect today. So great work.
Fantastic. No, thank you, Dan. I really enjoyed the conversation and sharing that story with you.